April the 20th, 2026. My name is Francisco Gaffney, and this is my daily streaming all about governance, risk, compliance, and advisory boards. And this week, I'm going to talk about something that's on people's mind, those looking to or at overseas or the international expansions, the growth, this desire, this wanting to know whether the business is ready to scale or only eager to expand, right? Because sometimes people are pondering these questions. So the problem, I think, is deeper and sharper than most boards or executive teams and founders admit. Because international growth can look like a progress while the core of the business is quite getting weaker. And you say, how that come? Because we are expanding internationally. Well, it's I'll be walking through how the advisory board operating system works in practice, particularly for international expansions or going cross borders. Not as a theory, not as a nice looking model and on a slide, but as a board operating system. So you can use it when the company is trying to grow without breaking itself. Let me pull the model here so you can see what we're talking about. This is an operating system model. And today we are going to talk about scaling, but not from the point of view of scaling itself, but from the point of view when you're going to go international, right? So we are going to go about this section on the top, which is this one. I leave the model here so you understand why all these things are working together when you are considering business decision, particularly when you're deciding, okay, I'm going to go make the big jump. I'm going to go from my geography to expanding across Europe, or going to West in terms of Middle East or Asia Pacific, or the other way around. I'm going to go to Latin America or to the US and Canada, etc., etc. So today in particular, I would like to talk about the commercial acceleration and scaling, how you operate from this particular point of view of internationalization. What a word. So from the asset lens, today also I'm going to look into three particular ones, which are in the graph in front of us, which is about your brand, your people, and your partnerships. And this is where I come in as a board advisor, right? I put together a rotating international advisory board around the milestones in this particular case. When you go cross borders or international, this is your milestone in front of your company. So the organization gets the specialist or the specialist capability needs in a fraction of the time it takes to hire one executive, without the big consulting overhead, without the talent locking. Because once you set food on the other side, you don't just internationalization process, right? So how you then gain relevancy and market share, etc., on the other side. So probably you need another specialist there, another kind of talent or networking, and the person that helps you to bridge that jump now probably is not being as useful, not because of the capacity and skills, because actually they are very good preparing the company to go overseas or cross border, but that is their expertise. And you don't want somebody sitting there that actually at 50-60% of the capacity. You want somebody that can least can deliver at 80-90% of their capacity. So you can swap members every 6 months as a project evolves. Now, let's go into the unpleasant realities, and we go into how to solve them. So many companies do not fail overseas because the demand is lacking. Actually, that's why companies go overseas or cross-border, because they see that there's a demand and they have a product or services they want to sell. So they fail because the operating system was never ready or prepared to travel. To travel, I mean, and there's not a pun intended here in terms of a joke, is that the traveling means actually cannot expand, it cannot go bigger because it's not prepared for that particular task or project. So the risk I would like to talk about today is these false internals or if the false sensation that international scale is a good idea before a good preparation. So But what gives you an international scaling? So it gives you a bigger story because it's good news, a busier board pack, yes, because you had to shuffle more papers because we're going international. But more countries, more meetings, more local promises, more channel partners. But what has happened is that underneath of all that, you start to get less control. Your company start to feel weaker. You feel that actually you are a jack of all trades. The things are going a bit too out of hand, and you say, "What's going on?" After 6 months, a year in this process, and you start to see how your own operation, national operations, start to get cracks everywhere. So let's look at three problems with this. I brought a lot of statistics today again because I like to see what is going on in the studies that have been done in the market, and then we'll see how we can put this together based on this information, how we can take advantage of that without reinventing the wheel, right? So if you say, well, this is at not for us because we are not at that size of the enterprise, but look at the lessons that they are showing us, the learnings, the business principles that they have to overcome, or the challenges that they have to overcome. And that's the way that you say, okay, and now I have a better picture of what it implies to go international. So I can plan it better, I can do it better, I can have the odds on my favor, if you may. So the first thing is that boards often mistaken or movement for scaling, right? So let's see some statistics here. The UK is still a major exporting economy with a total of around 926 billion in 2025. But the picture is not very even. So goods exports fell by 2% in February this year, like 3 weeks ago. So the latest statistics say that actually goods export fell by 1.5% or 2%. And that data shows that monthly trade can move against you quickly, right? So if you are forecasting, and yet we'll say, there's a scenario, there's a Middle East war, there's a problem there that actually create obviously, who would guess actually when everybody thought that it was a settled issue, all of a sudden a new war happened in February. Yeah, it's true. But you see how fast the trade can move against you. So that matters because a few early wins in one market are not proof that your commercial model is portable. Portable means that goes to different geographies with the same success. There's a remedy for that, by the way, but actually just to give you some ideas of what's going on. The second thing I will consider as a problem, as a risk, is the people side is tighter than many expansions plans admit. And you say, what I have to do this with it? There's a lot to do because it's all about your people. For trading businesses with more than 10 employees, labor costs were the most common challenge in March this year, right? 35% of companies reported that labor costs were the biggest challenge. And the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development says that employer confidence remains at risk, or at the risk side of the equation, meaning that actually they are not certain what to do. And hiring intentions are historically low outside the pandemic, right? So, and 3/4 of employers expect the Employment Rights Act to increase costs. So if your home market, the people model, is already under strain, adding another geography usually makes the crack wider, no smaller, right? Because how you're going to address the problems that you have today here, and at the same time trying to go to another place, another country, another jurisdiction with other different laws. Anyway, the third problem that I want to mention today is that partnerships are not a shortcut if the market itself is harder to read, right? So many people go and say, let's go with a distribution system, a partnership, a joint venture, etc., etc. But look at these statistics. The British Chamber of Commerce data shows that only 21% of exporters reported increased exports orders in Q4 2025, right? And only 28% reported a decrease. Or you see 21% an increase, but 28% a decrease. So you have more people decreasing orders than people increasing orders. And particularly for SMEs, only 19% reported increased orders, right? Which is good news because larger organizations seem to have a kind of a mixed emotion there, but SMEs are showing increase in orders. So that will probably encourage SMEs is up to 250 employees and 44 million pounds in revenue. So if your company are fitting that model, probably showed an increase in exports, right? If you're international. And Make UK says that 8 to 10 manufacturers have been affected by tariff or duties. So we don't need to go there, but actually just to give you a picture. So we have challenges with labor, we have challenges on mixed reports in terms of export for organizations on different sizes, and also we have in overall the exports of goods decrease overall particularly this year. Now, in other words, if you're going to go international, imagine that expansion is like adding an extra carriage to your train. So you have already a train that is going and traveling through this market, your current market, and you add an extra carriage. So if the coupling's weak, the train does not look stronger. It becomes harder to control because actually you start to see things actually are moving everywhere and moving your own operation, because actually the movement at the back of the train start to move the rest of the train that was stable before. So you have to be careful how you do things. So as a board or an executive team or as a founder, have you to ask perhaps a better question. So if scale is not more countries on a slide, what it is. So actually scale in a slide as you see, we're going to go international in this area and the area. So if scaling is not going international, what it is. So as a board advisor, what I would propose to consider is the following. Number one, first, test brand portability. In other words, will relevant people recognize your brand in other markets? So what exactly must travel and change? Your promise, your proof, your pricing logic, your positioning. So if each new market needs a fresh story to make the offer land, the brand is not traveling, right? Because actually you have whatever you have in your own space, if you have to redo it again with a fresh story, a new story, an adapted story, a new logo, whatever you name it. So then probably your brand is not traveling. So then you have a branding problem rather than an expansion or scaling problem. It is being rebuilt from scratch again. And sometimes it's needed for several reasons. But if that in general, your services and products requires a full new fresh story when you're landing in a new market, you start to have to see a problem of branding. And then you will have to look into that first before even considering the next steps. The second problem or the second thing to consider is test the people's portability. And again, portability means as with the brands, will your key people have the connections, the networks, and the reputations in the new markets? So let's strip out the heroics here. What still works if the founders, for example, disappears for 30 days? It means actually, no, I cannot travel until the next month. So what will happen in the other market when the founder that is carrying all the decisions, all the strategic moves, all the networking, et cetera, cannot travel there for very important meetings or to support the team in the other geographies? So then who owns the local decisions? Who approve exceptions? So how fast can the board or the executive team or you as a founder see delivery quality or customer issues and commercial slippage? So if the people system depends on one person standing in the middle, the business is not ready to scale internationally. It's very risky. It is only ready to travel with supervision, right? So you have to stage that process until you create not only your branding, also your core teams in place to have the same power that have your own teams in country or in your geographies. So the third thing to consider is the test your partnership quality. And this you see in the map here in the model, you can follow this. We are talking about brands, people, and partnerships. Do not ask only whether a partner can get you into the market. Ask whether they improve your margins. Our reporting visibility is increasing or decreasing. The compliance disciplines and customer quality, how that works. So a weak partner can accelerate entry, right? By while also slowing value creation. And you want to, at the very end of the exercise, is that your company increase in value, right? So you have to consider that too. So your partnership sometimes open the doors to the market, but it's a kind of a nebulous situation where you say we are in that market, but actually all the valuation and the bottom line of the valuation of the company is not really as strong as it should be, because actually all these things are not very well, they don't have a good governance, if you may. So the board or your executive team or yourself as a founder should treat partnerships as part of the operating model. So it's part of your branding, your people and your operating model, to not an outsourced. And sometimes it's a big hopes in partners, distributions, and resellers. They're saying, "Oh, they are going to help us to get into that market." But if you don't have clear what a partner's discipline have to be, and discipline is not a punishment, it's like the processes, the flows, the standardization of activities, and the understanding of your identity and your ethos as a mark, as a brand, then probably is not really helping you to add value at the core of your business. So what's the next challenge then? So who helps the boards, the executive teams, or you as a founder do that work quickly without overhiring, overpaying, or handing the whole thing to a generic consulting team? So that's where I come into place. And I give you three specific things: business outcomes, differentiators, and risk reductions. In terms of outcomes, I help boards or executive teams or you as a founder to turn international scale from a sales ambition into a commercial system. As you see, the whole system here, you can apply it to the international expansion. So the company can prove that its brand and people and partnership will travel before it commits more capital and more risk. This is a very specific business outcome of going international. So you have to prove before committing more capital and more risk. In terms of differentiator, I build a rotating international advisory board around the exact milestone in front the company or what this company is facing today, which is in this case international expansion. That gives you specialist capability across market entry, brand transfer, commercial design, governance, partnerships, and leadership depth in a fraction of the time it takes to hire one executive and without the big consulting overhead. And in terms of helping you reduce risk, members can be swapped of this international advisory board every 6 months as the project evolves. So the board gets the right expertise for diagnosis, design, execution at each stage of the process without the talent locking or carrying the wrong capability for too long. Now, one action you can take home today, and it's doable in 30 minutes or less, before the next meeting, ask the management for a one-page international readiness scorecard with 3 columns only: the brand, the people, and the partnerships. And each one marked with red, amber, or green with the one sentence of evidence, right? So if your brand have a very good sentence of evidence that is going to expand international and is recognized, as I mentioned, is recognized, the people understand what you do, how you do it, what your products, etc. So that would be a green. If the evidence is not clear, probably yellow. But if they have no evidence that people recognize your brand, at least in the circles that you start the process, that is a red. So then your problem is a branding problem, or you identified already before even investing more internally what is your perception of brand. And the similar process with the people and the partnerships. So let's pause here for today and reconvene tomorrow, because tomorrow I will move from scale to predictability, which is the second section here on the right of our model, because international growth only deserves better capital when revenue, your partnerships, and your assets stop looking exciting and start looking dependable, right? All right. So if you are a board member, non-executive, director, or in the executive team, or as a founder, and you want an international advisory board to help your organization implement this model in practice, test whether the business can travel and build that capability faster than hiring one executive or without the overhead of large consultancy. Let's have a 30-minute call so I can understand where you are today, what you like to achieve, and how an international advisory board can help you to achieve that at much easier. So have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, and bye-bye.